Good afternoon, everyone. Thursday afternoon, and so time to prepare for the sermon. And this Sunday is Pentecost Sunday, the great feast of Pentecost, the feast that concludes this Easter season. 50 days of rejoicing in the gift of new life, the gift of new life that comes to each and every one of us through our baptism because of the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so it's been a different sort of Easter, hasn't it? 50 days locked up, well, more than 50 days, but we've been unable to gather as the new people of God. And that has changed in many ways our thoughts surrounding what it means to be church and how we are to be church. And throughout this time, I've spoken about the idea of maintaining our commitment to mission, because that's the reason the church exists, to proclaim Jesus, that we maintain that mission, that we have to be faithful, even in this lockdown, to mission. But we change the ways we do mission, how we do mission. And so, as we celebrate the Feast of Pentecost, the birthday of the church, when this group of 120 men and women received the Holy Spirit, received the mandate to go out on mission, we recall that we, each and every one of us, need to be focused on how we are going to be missionary. How are we going to invite? How are we going to welcome people into the church and into a relationship with Jesus Christ? So I hope in the back of your mind, as you prepare for this wonderful feast, you have that there, that we belong to the church and the church has a mission. And that mission is given to the church at Pentecost. Okay, so keep that in your mind as you prepare for Sunday. So, there are a number of masses given for the Feast of Pentecost, but we'll take the Mass of the day, of course. And so the first reading comes from the Acts of the Apostles, you guessed it right. Chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. And then the psalm is Psalm 104. And then the second reading, we've finished reading St. Peter's first letter. We now go to St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. Chapter 12, verse 3 to 7. And then 12 to 13. And then before the Alleluia is sung, there is the sequence. And the sequence is almost a hymn, a song of praise and in honor of the Spirit. And it's really beautiful, and we'll sing that at Mass on Sunday. And then, of course, the Gospel is taken from St. John's Gospel. Near the end, chapter 20, verses 19 to 23. As you know, I usually like to begin with the Gospel. The Gospel speaks to us today about unity and peace. That part of one of the gifts of the Spirit to this new community is peace and forgiveness. And so fundamentally this new community, the church that comes to birth, is a community that is or should be at peace with one another and with the world, and that peace comes about through forgiveness, by being open to forgiving one another. And that is a vital thought or thing to consider as we look at the church and look at our membership and participation in the life of the church. Are we at peace? Are we a forgiving community? Okay. The reading that I will focus on the most, I think, in my sermon is from the Acts of the Apostles, the first reading, which describes what happens at Pentecost. It's such a powerful reading. It really is, isn't it? I think, though, we need to make sure that we keep in our minds the fact that Pentecost was and is a Jewish feast. It is a big celebration. 50 days, Penta, 50 days after the Passover. So that the disciples were waiting and praying at this time is not totally weird or different, because they were preparing for a big feast. However, it takes on a different significance, doesn't it, with Jesus' command to them to go back to Jerusalem and stay in Jerusalem for the gift of the counselor, the advocate, the gift of the Father. And so they're waiting for that as well as preparing for this feast. What is the Jewish Feast of Pentecost about? It's a celebration of that covenant between God and his people that was established on Mount Sinai when Moses was given the 10 Commandments, correct? The 10 Commandments. And so that's what Pentecost in the Jewish tradition celebrates. But of course, for us, for Christians, that feast, because of the descent of the Spirit, takes on a new meaning. Okay? The fulfillment of the covenant. Another thing I'm thinking of, and it's not something I really was focused on or had paid much attention to until Father Mjengaseni said it in his lesson with the kids, and Trish Bailey sent me an SMS asking about the number 120. Of course I knew 100, but I hadn't really given that number much thought. So I did a bit of investigation, and it's interesting, that number 120. 12 apostles times 10. Okay, straight away you see that. But also, if you go and look at the second book of Chronicles in the Old Testament, it's about Solomon building, the start of it, about building the temple. David, his father, had wanted to build the temple, but he didn't, of course, and so Solomon built the temple. And after the temple was built, there is the consecration, the dedication of the temple, in chapter 6 primarily. And how many priests are involved in the dedication? 120. 120 priests. So go and have a look at that. So there's a link then between the temple of the Old Testament and the new temple that we become because of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. So that's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. So I'll say something about that in my sermon. And then, of course, the second reading from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians about us all being baptized into Christ, that all of us have the Holy Spirit. And it is that gift of the Spirit which binds us together and leads in then, of course, to the gospel, okay, where we are a community of peace and a community of forgiving men and women. So those are some thoughts, interesting thoughts and ideas for you to mull over as we draw close to Sunday's great feast of Pentecost. I hope to see you with us, joining us. Make sure you don't forget to wear red or some bright orange, yellow, colory, fiery color clothes, and take photographs and send them in to us. Also, we'll have the digital foyer, so don't rush off after Mass. Say hi to us. It'd be great to be able to welcome you and to greet you. Take care, look after yourselves, stay safe, God bless.